Hey sweet friends, welcome to another member exclusive full tutorial video. Today we are decorating cookies for a boy baby shower. Now this set could easily be transformed into girl colors if you are wanting to do this theme for a girl baby shower, but for this set, obviously this was for a baby boy named James, who just so happens to be my sweet, beautiful nephew. Now the theme for this shower was a kind of boho antler, macrame neutrals with blues theme, and so that is why you see me using the browns, the tans, the blues. You see me using a little bit of antlers and some greenery. So all of that theme was given to me by the hostesses of the shower, but I am really proud of how it turned out, and so I hope that this tutorial is beneficial for you if you have a similar theme, or even just the skills that you use in this set can definitely be used on a lot of other themes as well. Now there are quite a few designs in this set, so this is going to be a long tutorial video, so I hope that you have grabbed a snack or something to eat while you watch this video, but let's go ahead and get going with our first design, which will be the initial for the baby as well as the antlers. Now I took this design element from an invitation, so pretty much this piece, this cookie, was really the inspiration behind the entire set. And when you see me project the image in just a little bit, you'll see me project the invitation or a invitation onto the cookie. And so at that point in time, you'll see what that looked like. But this cookie really is the jumping off point for the entire design for the entire set. So I wanted to start with this one as far as we are decorating first. So I chose to do the antlers and the initial for the baby on a circle cookie. And again, like always, I will have everything linked in the description box below. You don't have to search for this on your own. I will have it all linked in the description box below, but the cookie cutter itself is, I use the metal circle cookie cutters that are found on Amazon. I love them because you get multiple sizes in one set, which is perfect because you use all the different sizes so much and you can use them endlessly for one price. So I highly recommend, if you don't have a circle set, that you invest in some because you will use them quite a bit. It's always a good investment. Cookie cutters are always a good investment if it's cookie cutters that you know that you can use over and over again, no matter what the theme is. And circles are definitely one of those. You are going to outline your circle cookie, which I hate outlining and flooding circles. They never look perfect and they just drive me crazy. I don't know why, but I just hate circles. But anyway, so you're going to outline and flood your circle cookie. Now you can see my icing here is a little on the thick side. So I'm going to have to pick up my cookie and shake it to kind of smooth it out. And then I pop air bubbles after that, which I'm never fearful of thicker icing because as long as it's not too thick, you can always pretty much shake it to smooth it out. Whereas if you err too much on the other side and your icing is too thin, especially with circles, it just feels like it just falls off the edge so easy. So definitely make sure you're not using too thin of icing for your flood. After my cookie has dried under a fan for several hours, I have explained my workflow before, but I tend to do all of my flooding in the morning, and then I take a break and I take care of my kids and I do lunch and homeschool, whatever we need to do. And then in the afternoon, when my kids are done with school and we're resting and all of that, that's when I come back and I do detail work on my cookies. And so I have several hours there that my cookies are drying under a fan. So once my cookies have dried, then I start doing the detail work on all of them. So here you see me project the invitation onto the cookie. And the first thing I'm going to do off of this invitation is I really just wanted the antlers. So I'm going to project those on here and you can see how perfectly they go onto a round cookie. So that's one of the reasons why I chose that particular design, is because they fit so good on a round cookie. But with thick brown icing, I'm going to then add my antlers and kind of layer them. So, you know, antlers aren't perfectly smooth. They're not all uniform. They're kind of thinner in some places and thicker in other places. So to accomplish that look, as you can see, I'm going back and forth with my thicker icing over and over again. And then after I have the thickness built up, I'm using my scribe tool and I'm smoothing it out and connecting my icing just a little bit. Now again, you're not looking for perfectly smooth. You're not looking for like smooth like a flood icing. These are antlers we're talking about. So you can have them be just a little bit rough in places, but you want to smooth them out just a tiny bit so that the icing blends together a little bit so it doesn't just look like you just layered icing on top of each other. Once you have your antlers done, you will then want to let your cookie dry for just a little while. This is thick icing. It's not a lot of icing. It's not going to take very much time at all to dry, but I tend to go ahead and let that part dry and then I do the next step. However, you could do the next step, which is the initial. You could do that part right now and then let everything dry to do the final step. So it's just really up to you on where you want to break up your workflow. I let my antlers dry. And now I'm going back and doing the initial. And in order to do my font, I use the Fonto app on my iPad, and then I connect my projector to my iPad, and then I just project it onto my cookie. After I have outlined the initial, I did not want to flood this. I wanted to keep that simplistic look. The cookie is going to be really busy otherwise, and so I really just kind of wanted the outline of the letter to have just that simplicity and that beauty without having to fill it in. After you have outlined your letter, then you're going to go back and you're going to add some greenery and flowers to the bottom of the antler. Now there's really no rhyme or reason here. You're just going to want to use a thick green icing. Now I had two types of green icing for this set. I had a dark thick green icing and I had a light thick green icing. So the dark green I'm using for my stems, and then the light green I'm using for the leaves. So you're just going to want to kind of cover your bottom of your cookie with some vines, some stems, just to kind of give you a place to put your leaves. Again, there's no rhyme or reason here. I just kind of randomly went places with my little stems so that I could add my greenery onto the cookie. So with this leaves, I cut the tiniest hole in the bottom of my bag, and you can do this with tips if you're a tip person with your icing bags. If you'd rather have a tip, you can do this with a size 0 or a 00 with the PMI tips. Those are my very favorite whenever I did use tips all the time. Those are my favorite for really little icing, but you're more than welcome to also just cut the bottom of your bag. Once I started using tipless bags, I've not looked back, other than you have to use tips for some things like flowers. But for just my normal day-to-day icing, I'm just going to cut just a tiny bit off of my bottom of my bag. And then you will, with your thick icing, you'll touch where the stems are. You'll put a little bit of pressure on your bag. And then as you touch where the leaves are, you release the bag as you pull away. And it gives you just that little bitty dot, kind of like a triangle at the end. It's kind of like a raindrop kind of a shape on your leaves. So you don't press very much, just enough to get out the icing, and then as soon as you touch down, you let go and you pull out, and that will give you that teardrop, raindrop type shape for your leaves. After I did the smaller green leaves, now I'm going to do a different kind of leaf with my dark green icing. It's the same icing that I used for my stems. So instead of starting at my stem and pulling outward, this time I'm going to do the same kind of technique. I'm going to go down with my icing. I'm going to squeeze on my icing to let some icing out, and then I'm going to let go, but instead of pulling away from the stem so that I have a teardrop type, I'm going to actually pull the icing towards the stem. So then your leaves are going the opposite direction. It just gives more detail to your florals, to your leaves. It's just in those little details that make your cookie stand out. So if you had all the leaves going the same direction, even though they're two different colors, it just wouldn't be as, I don't know what the right word is. It just looks better. I don't know how to say it any way other than that. If you can alternate different directions and you can make things look differently. I mean, in nature, you go out, right, and you don't find two leaves that are the same unless it's the exact same plant. So this way you have two different types of greenery going on your cookie. I hope that makes sense. So you can see all the different stems that I did. I just tried to cover them with leaves, but now we're going to go in and add some flowers. So this tip I will list in the description box below, but it tends to be, it's one of my floral tips that I like to use, and you're just going to go around. I highly recommend, if you don't have a turntable, that you get a turntable for your florals. I can't imagine not using a turntable for my cookies at all. I rely on it so much, but I know a lot of people don't use turntables. So for me, though, with flowers, you basically have to have a turntable to get that right movement, but you'll just go all the way around with a thick icing, thick icing to do your florals. After you've gone all the way around with the little floral leaves, then you will add your sprinkles on top, your non-perils. I always say it wrong. Your little white sprinkles. And again, I'll link that in the description box below, but you'll add that on top. And I wanted to incorporate a little bit of blue because the set is for a boy. And so I also wanted to go back and add some blue onto my floral stems. So just with a blue thick icing, you're just going to do, I just did a little dot of blue icing just randomly throughout the floral stems so that my fullness of my greenery is there as well as the additional color. But I'm not done. I did want to add just one little more floral element, again with that dark blue icing. It's actually the different blue. I have two different blues. I have like a blue jean type blue, and then I have like a navy blue. So with the navy blue, I went back and added just a little floral rosette. And again, I will put all of these piping tips in the description box below, so you don't have to keep in mind which ones I'm using. They'll be listed in the description box below. And then I just added those three little florals around my big flower. With your scribe tool, whenever you're doing those rosettes, sometimes you get some stiff peaks off of it. So you'll see me often get my scribe tool and just kind of pat down my rosettes just so that they're not pokey. And that's it. Our little antler cookie with the baby's initial and our little flower bunch is done. And I really think it turned out really nice and was a great start and a kickoff for all the other designs in this set. Our next design is a baby cookie. Obviously, this is a baby shower, and so it's okay to have a cookie that just says baby, I thought. So I wanted to do this on a plaque. Now, this is one of our designs, and again, it's linked in the description box below. This is our long hexagon. I believe this one is our medium size. I actually really like our largest size the best. That's the one I use the most, but I believe this one is the medium size. And I wanted to kind of do that lighter blue. I guess I said it's kind of a blue jean blue, but maybe it's a little bit more of a dusty blue. But I wanted to do this one in the lighter color. And I was really looking in this design to do cookies that had a little bit of a simplistic elegance to them. And I think one of the ways that you can accomplish that is whenever you do the same color on top of another color. So for here, I'm going to do, obviously the base is going to be this lighter blue color, and then also the wording will be that same exact color. So you still get definition of the design. You can still see the words, but it's just there's something simplistic and beautiful about that color on color look. Now, I wouldn't do it all the time. I think showers are a great way to do it. Baby showers, wedding showers. I think like anniversaries are a good time to do it. Anything bridal is a good time to do it. But I don't know that I would necessarily keep that same, do the same color on top of the base color for like birthday sets, or unless it was for an adult. I think for an adult birthday you could get away with it, but I think when it's kids' birthdays it kind of needs to be more pop, more vibrancy, so that's why I don't tend to do it there. But for here, I thought it really worked well for a baby shower. All of these graphics will be on Patreon, so you don't have to look up the wording that I used here for baby. I will have this graphic listed for you guys on Patreon, but I did use a very thick icing to outline, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to fill in these empty spaces with a medium consistency icing. Now, this is the same icing that I'm using to flood my cookies. So that's one of the reasons why I chose a thicker flood for all of these cookies, because I knew I was going to be using it for some of these letterings, these detail works, these details on top of my cookies, which means if you use too thin of a icing to come back and fill in these letterings, you're going to have it's going to be crater city. You're going to have so many craters. So you really do need to have a thicker icing to make sure that your letters stay looking as good as they do when you first flood them. So to accomplish that, use a thicker icing to fill it in, but also, I don't know if it always works, but I do think it helps if you go back and you fill in these areas with the thicker icing to kind of give it a little bit more stability under that thinner icing to keep it from cratering. Now you can see as I am filling in these letters, you can see that my icing is a decently medium consistency. After about 20 seconds, it does kind of blend together, but it's not just falling together right away like flood consistency normally does. So that's what I mean by a medium consistency. You can see the definition as it sits there. The longer it sits there, it does smooth out on its own a little bit, but it's not going to do it right away. So that is the kind of consistency that I prefer when doing detail work. Now, obviously, I still need to help out this cookie a little bit. So I am going to get my scribe tool and I'm going to smooth out all of the icing into the lettering. And that also helps to make sure that I get out any air bubbles, because you definitely don't want any air bubbles on your cookie at this point, or you will have those nasty little craters. So take your time, go slow, smooth out all of those letters. And that's really all that this cookie was. I really wanted that just simplistic beauty. So we just went with a plain background and a plain writing on top that says baby. That's it. This second design is done. Let's move on to for this child we have prayed. Now I specifically chose that saying for this set because it is something that my sister-in-law has said multiple times during her pregnancy. It's a verse that they even used when they announced their pregnancy. So I knew it was special to them, and so I wanted to include it on her baby shower set. Obviously, if it's not a religious person who you are making these cookies for, you can leave out this design altogether. I am using the same cookie cutter for this one that I did for the baby, although I use the medium size for the baby. This is our long hexagon in our Etsy shop. I use the medium size for the word baby. This time I'm using the large, which will have enough room for me to write all of those words. And I am using the brown. And I know brown's not the cutest color and it's not the greatest thing to decorate with, but I knew I was going to be using brown for the antlers in the original design. So I decided to add brown other places too, so that there wasn't just brown on the antlers. It was in other designs as well, which, as you know, I'm like a broken record in all of my videos. As you know, if I use a color scheme somewhere, I want to repeat it in the set. So if I use a design element somewhere, I want to repeat it in the set so that you have that cohesion. And that is one of the things that, even though I'm not like crazy about brown, I knew they were doing neutrals and I knew they were using lots of wood elements in the shower decor. The antlers for sure were a big thing because that was also a part of my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law used in the monthly pictures of their baby, and I knew they were going to be incorporating that into the nursery decor. So I knew the antlers were a big deal, and I knew that they would be doing some woodsy elements, and so it was okay for me to do brown. If you hate brown, you can just avoid it altogether and just use other neutral colors. After I flooded and let the cookie dry, now is the time to do all of our writing on this cookie. Now, this is a little bit trickier because it's really small writing, and that sometimes is very difficult if you don't have the right consistency of icing. So you don't want to have too thin. If you have too thin of icing and you go to do writing, it can look really sloppy. You can't get the definition that you need, and it just makes a huge difference on how the finished product looks. So if you're doing writing, especially small writing, you definitely want to make sure you have thicker icing. Now, there is a fine line. If it's too thick, then it doesn't stick well to the cookie. It can break off. I mean, there is a fine line. You don't want to add too much powdered sugar to thicken up your icing, but you definitely want to do a test to make sure that whenever you go to pipe it, if you do multiple lines next to each other, make sure that they do not run together at all. That's how thick it needs to be. If you can put multiple lines of icing next to each other with your thick icing, and each line keeps its shape and they do not blend together at all, you have the right consistency for this type of writing. But I will warn you, when you are doing a whole lot of piping with that thick of a consistency, it can hurt your hand to kind of squeeze on the bag that hard, because with thicker icing, you have to squeeze harder to get the icing out of the bag. So it is kind of a fine line. You definitely hope that if you're doing a set that has to have a lot of thick icing, that you don't have to use it just overwhelmingly amount, because you will hurt. It's worth it to make sure that your design looks as good as you made it, because you have the right consistency. For this child, I'm going to go back and fill in those blank areas with thinner icing so that you kind of have the look of the bubble letters, just like we did with baby. And then we have prayed. I am just doing print, so there will be no filling it in. I am just taking my time with the small print and doing my lettering. Now you are going to, when you're doing this small of print, in addition to having thick icing, you're going to want to have just a very tiny little hole at the end of your bag to be able to pipe it out and not run into each other, not have, if it's too big of a hole, obviously too much icing is going to come out and you're not going to be able to get these small of letters. So if you cut too big of a hole and you have to rebag your icing, I definitely recommend taking the time to do so, because it will make a huge difference with your quality of lettering and the time it takes you to do it. All right, so for this child, we have prayed is done. Now we need to fill in our bubble letters. Once again, I'm going to be using the same icing that I used to flood my cookie, keeping in mind that I used thick icing for my flood to begin with. Now I don't have a whole lot of space here. It's just real tiny writing, so this isn't going to take a whole lot of icing, but it still takes time. There's still quite a few letters here that I'm going to have to fill in. So I'm doing this all at once. I'm going through, I wrote everything out at once. Now I'm filling in all of my bubble letters at once, and then I'm going to be coming back with my scribe tool and smoothing it all out at once. I know a lot of cookiers who might have done 4 and then stopped and then used their scribe tool and smoothed it out. And then they did the next word and then they smoothed it out. And that's just to prevent that icing from crisping over before you get over to smooth it out. And there are times that I have to do that. But for this word, thankfully, I didn't have to break it down that way. If you are having issues with your icing crisping over before you get back to it to smooth it out, like on the word baby or here or any time that you're doing bubble letters, then I recommend that you do break it down more, that you don't fill in everything and then go back and smooth it out. Sometimes you might need to actually do little sections at a time to get the quality that you need to be able to smooth it out before that icing starts to dry and gets hard, and then you can't smooth it out. This cookie I thought looked a little plain, whereas I really liked the baby cookie, and in a little while I'm doing the baby's name, James, and that cookie will be plain as well. This one, I wanted to add some greenery and some color to the cookie, probably just because it was brown and it's not like the prettiest color in the world. So I wanted to add something that made this cookie look a little bit more beautiful. And so that's why I did, for this child, we have prayed on the lower portion of the cookie, and then I left the top portion to be able to add some greenery and some flowers just to make it a little bit prettier and to tie into the set better. So the first thing you're going to do, just like what we did with the antler cookie, you're going to want to start somewhere with a vine, with your stem, so that gives you a place to build up your florals and your leaves. So you kind of need a starting point, and so that's what the greenery is for me. And then you're going to come back with some green leaves, just like what we did with the antlers. So you're going to choose your dark green, and the same thing. You start with a blob of icing away from the stem, you squeeze out, and then you let go of the icing bag as you pull down towards the stem. And here, this is a little bit bigger of an area than I was working with on the antler cookies. So these leaves can be a little bit thicker as I work my way down the stem. So I'm doing a little bit bigger of a dot of icing before I pull down than I did necessarily on the antler cookie. And honestly, there's kind of no rhyme or reason to my madness here. I'm just choosing various stems and I'm just using those for this style of leaf. And then of course I'll come back and do the other leaves on the other stems that I have left empty. And truthfully, this leaf is my favorite type of leaf to do. I really enjoy. It's really soothing. It's really easy to do once you've mastered the technique. It's really easy to do that motion where you squeeze, pull, squeeze, pull, squeeze, pull, and you can go back and forth rotating on either side of the stem. So that's kind of my favorite way to do leaves. However, I enjoy the look of doing a second leaf differently. I enjoy that. So that's why you see me doing that here. Whereas I could have potentially just done all of my leaves this way. I kind of enjoy what it looks like having the alternating leaf style on each of my greenery. But if I'm doing leaves on other sets, the dark green leaf is always my default leaf whenever I'm doing greenery. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to fill in all the empty areas with the lighter green color now. I'm not going to overfill this area. I'm just going through and I'm adding it in the empty spaces. Sometimes you'll see me come back later and add more if I think it needs more, but I think that's good for now. And then I'm going to add the same little blue little berries or circles or flowers, whatever we want to call these. I'm adding that little touch of blue onto the greenery as well, just like I did in that antler cookie, because where it is on one design, I want to repeat that. So I definitely wanted to make sure that the greenery here mirrored the greenery that we've already done. Instead of doing the rosettes like I did the dark navy rosettes on the antler cookie, I thought that big of a flower element on this cookie, it might make things feel a little lopsided. So I didn't want just a huge floral element on here, but I still wanted to add that dark navy. So instead of doing the rosette, I just put on a simple tip on that bag, and I did just a circle flower. So that way it's different than the dots I was doing. It actually looks more like a flower, but I just did a little circle. So as you can see here in the close-up of the finished cookie, it kind of looks like a little flower cup on our design. And that is it for this child. We have prayed is done. Whew. All right, I'm back. Y'all didn't even know I was gone, but I had to go pick up my kids from school. So now I am back to doing this tutorial, and I'm trying to remember where we left off. I think the last thing we did was for this child, we have prayed. So our next design is going to be the James Darrow cookie. Whew, I'm a little out of breath because I just felt like I was just running, getting the kids and then getting backpacks and everything in. So with this cookie, I wanted to kind of mimic the baby cookie where it was the color on color. So it's the dark blue, the navy blue as the base, and then the writing will also be the navy blue color. With this flood, once again, you can see that I'm using a thick flood, and again, I'm doing that because one, I prefer a thicker flood, but two, it will matter later when I go to fill in the James bubble part of those letters. It's good to have this thicker icing versus a really thin flood. Now, if I wanted to, I could have made 3 bags of icing. So I could have made the really thick icing, which I use for outlining and writing and detail work. I could have done a medium consistency icing, just straight up medium, which would have been even a little bit thicker than this for the writing and some of that detail that needed to be on the thicker side of things, but not too thick, so it's still smoothed out. And then I could have done a flood. So that could have been 3 consistencies for this one color, but I'm like you guys, and we're busy, and doing that many consistencies for every single color, it takes time. It adds up. It's extra supplies, it's extra time. So if I can just get away with making my flood thicker and using that icing to fill in, I'm going to do that every time. So it's just preference. If you would rather have 3 different consistencies, obviously that medium consistency, you wouldn't need a ton of icing. You would just need a little bit of icing in a bag for that. So it wouldn't be that much extra time if you'd rather just go ahead from the beginning, have a completely separate consistency to do that detail work. Just for me, I preferred to just try to get away with only having the 2 different bags of icing per color. All right, so after obviously my cookie has dried and I'm doing my outline work, I really try to think about where my word placing is. I really, in the graphic design element of all of this, when I'm doing my fonts and I'm playing around with my lettering, I really try to think about spacing. I try to think about symmetry. I try to think about balance. And so when I did this font, I knew I wanted the James to be in lowercase. Baby is in lowercase. For this child, we have prayed is in lowercase. Well, we have prayed is in uppercase, but for this child was lowercase. So I did do a combination of lowercase and uppercase words, but I knew I wanted James to be lowercase. So when I was playing around with his middle name and where it would be placed on the cookie, I wanted to try to do the uppercase to kind of offset the lowercase of the James. And it just worked out spacing wise really well to place it underneath the AMES and let the J kind of hang down a little bit. So I got really lucky with the symmetry of all of this and the balance. I thought it looked really balanced as far as where all the letters went. But I do encourage you to play around with where you're placing your wording, where you're placing your letters to really help it be pleasing to the eye. We've all seen spacing that's off and it just doesn't work. And we've all seen fonts that just don't work. And so I think before you even touch your cookies, if you can get some of these design elements done and where you are confident with how they look and they look sharp and they look good, or even if they look fun and whimsy, whatever kind of style cookie you're doing, as long as it matches that theme, I really encourage you to take that extra time in designing. And that's the part we can all do in front of the TV. We can do it, while we're sitting down in the evening, resting after the kids have gone to bed, or maybe even in the morning before they wake up. So that's that kind of designing I always do before I touch a cookie, for that reason, so that I can get to this stage and be really confident with how it's going to look on my cookie. And for members, I am always happy to help you play around with fonts. If you have something like, if you're doing this set and you want to duplicate it exactly, and you want this font for your baby showers, the baby's name, I'm always happy to help you achieve that. So you can just send me a message. Of course, it's just a membership perk, and I want to always highlight that I'm here for you. And that's one of the things that comes with membership, is that if you are doing a set that I have done and you just want a new graphic with whatever the child's name is, or if it's not a child, it could be an anniversary set or a wedding set or an adult birthday, whoever's name it is. If you ever want that updated, the graphic updated to include that, all you have to do is send me a message and I'll get that to you as soon as I can. With this James Darrow, I did the same thing I did with baby and with the other writing. You just fill it in, you do the squiggly line and you fill it in with your medium consistency icing. And I don't know if the icing gods were just with me or what, but I didn't have any cratering with this set at all. I got really, really, really lucky. So I thought the end product looked pretty sharp. So there we go. The baby name cookie is done. Moving on to our leaf design. Now, again, this is one of our cookie cutters. I use this leaf design in a lot of my sets. I just kind of change it up based on the theme. I think it's a very versatile cookie cutter. One of those that I would, again, recommend you getting. And of course, you don't have to get ours. Bobby's Cutters has some really good leaf ones. Kaleidocuts have some really good leaf designs. There are lots of different options out there for doing a leaf cookie cutter, but it really is something that can be added to a lot of themes, and all you have to do is change the design a little bit or change the color a little bit. I've done Christmas cookies with this, baby shower cookies, birthdays, anniversary, wedding. I've literally done almost every theme with a leaf cookie. I can incorporate it somehow. So I encourage you, if you're looking to add some staples, some basic cookie cutters, a leaf one is always a good one to add. This base of this cookie is going to be brown, since I'm going to be doing a lot of those neutrals on top. And on that cookie for this child we have prayed, that cookie was also a base color of brown. So this way I'm able to incorporate the brown once more, but also because it's such a neutral, it will really allow the leaf floral element to kind of pop on top of it. So after I let the flood dry, then I'm going to go back and add all of my stems again, and then my leaves, and then my little floral pieces to this design. Now, an option 2 is always to do your floral elements on a naked cookie. You're more than welcome to not flood the base and do the floral stems and leaf and greenery on a naked cookie. Personally, I try to avoid naked cookies when I can, simply because they dry out faster, and so you don't have that freshness, that fresh, softer cookie for a very long period of time, because the icing, the royal icing, it kind of protects the cookie a little bit from drying out. Of course, your cookie's still going to dry out, but it seems to slow the process. So even though I love the way naked cookies look, and I sometimes still do them, I prefer to flood my cookie completely to just protect that freshness element of the cookies, especially when I'm making them for parties or anything where it will be several days before they get eaten. So like this set of cookies, the baby shower was on a Saturday. I probably made them on a Tuesday or Wednesday just so that I had plenty of time to photograph them and package them and have them prepared for the weekend. So I recommend, if you can, flood your cookie to do so. But I do love the way a naked cookie looks. And in fact, with this leaf cookie, for some Christmas cookies that I did a couple years ago, the ones I actually did when I auditioned for the Food Network Christmas Cookie Challenge, I did red berries on a white crackle, which was basically just painted cookies that you then bake, and then it gets a crackle effect. And so basically that was a naked cookie, and those cookies did get really hard really quickly. But they were just for my family, so it wasn't a huge of a deal. But whenever you're making for cookies for other people, that's definitely not the impression that you want to leave with them. You want them to think that your cookies always, like, the highest compliment I feel like you can get as a cookier, and maybe this is totally just my opinion, but I feel like one of the highest compliments that you can get as a cookier is your cookies taste as good as they look. Like, I feel like that's probably the best words you can hear someone say to you. So I never want to purposely sacrifice that. I never want to purposely sacrifice taste and the experience of eating my cookies for design. Sometimes it happens, but it's up to you. I say that it's all a personal preference, 100%. But if you can do anything to prevent a client or a potential customer who is just eating your cookies at an event, if you can do anything to prevent them from having a negative experience with your cookies, you obviously want to do so. Because a lot of times, my best business has come from, I ate your cookies or I saw your cookies at so-and-so's event and now I want them. That happens all the time. That's truly the nature of being good at what you do and being a business person, is that word of mouth. That's invaluable. And so you definitely want to always keep that in mind when you're doing your designs, which is why some people hate doing florals. This is a little bit different because I'm not doing a huge flower on a royal icing. I'm not doing a huge royal icing flower on a cookie, but a lot of people hate doing florals, like the big flowers, because you do have to use such stiff icing, and that royal icing, the stiffer your icing, the harder it dries. The more powdered sugar that's in there, the harder it dries. And then sometimes it feels like you're breaking your teeth. Like, it literally feels like you're eating hard candy at some points. And so there's a lot of people who do everything they can to avoid doing the large flowers on their cookies because of that. They don't want the client to bite down and break a tooth, or just be like, oh, this is like horrible hard icing on top of this cookie. So it's really it's what you're comfortable with. Now, I still do florals. In fact, I am wanting to do a video about florals because I do think there are times where it's worth the sacrifice to be able to get a floral cookie, to get that design included in your sets. But I can understand why some people do avoid it. I've been talking this whole time, so I haven't explained anything I'm doing. However, you have seen me do these greenery elements several times now, so I feel like it's okay that I just talked through it. But you will do your stems, and then you just layer that greenery. And so once again, I did the dark greenery first. I came back with the lighter green with the lighter blue, and then I'm going to do the blue circle flowers on this cookie, just like I did on the For This Child We Have Prayed cookie. So you just literally just loop it around. You just do a little swirl for these blue little flowers. I don't even know what this would be, a flower that this is similar of, but I think it's cute, and so it worked out for this design. So you can just randomly place them, and see where you feel like there's any holes in your greenery where a pop of blue color might look good. And then once you're done, that cookie's done. So that's one of the reasons why I love greenery is it's pretty simple design to execute. You can't really do it wrong. It's real hard to do it incorrectly. It looks good pretty much no matter what you do. And so doing greenery is a perk for that reason. And that cookie is done. The next design is probably the most complicated design in this set. And it was the one I was most nervous to attempt, and also the one that I knew would be the most painful. The most painful to execute. So first of all, we need to make a background. Again, this is another one of those times where it's like if you wanted to do the macrame on a blank cookie, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to choose to flood if I can. So I went ahead and flooded this with our light blue background. And then we will let that dry, and then we will do the macrame on top. Now, with the macrame, you are going to need very thick icing. So when I do my icing, when I do a fresh bowl of icing, it tends to be on the thicker side. I do like a thicker icing in my fresh batch, because then I'm able, if I have the consistency when I mix my icing fresh, if that consistency without adding anything to it is a piping consistency where I can outline, where I can write, where I can do all of the detail work, most of the detail work, that saves me time when I go to color my icing and bag my icing, because I already have the perfect consistency for details and for outlining. All I have to do is color it. So that's what I tend to do. So my icing mixed is a little bit on the thicker side. However, with the macrame, it has to be super thick. And so even though I start with a pretty thick icing, I still, in my bowl, added several spoonfuls of powdered sugar. So if you need to thicken an icing, that's what you do in your bowl. You get it colored how you want it first, get it colored correctly first, and then you will add 1 spoonful at a time of powdered sugar. Mix it up really good. The problem with adding powdered sugar now at the end versus when you're mixing fresh icing is because it can clump up. So you have to be real careful when you're adding it into your already mixed icing, already colored icing. You need to stir real good, because those little clumps of powdered sugar, they can clog up your bag. So they can clog up your piping bag even if you don't use tips, and they can clog up your tips. I've had that happen many times, and it's very frustrating. So you really want to make sure that you stir it really well, or you put a sift on top of your bowl, and as you're putting the powdered sugar in, you run the powdered sugar through the strainer, through the sift, and then that should help get out those clumps as well. All right, and then you get it to the right thickness here, and I'm doing an off-white. I'm doing that tan color that I flooded the first cookie, the Antler cookie, in. It's an off-white. It's kind of a tan color. So I'm doing that here for the macrame. The first thing I did is I did a brown across the top. And this is that long hexagon. This is the medium size. So this is the exact one I did the baby in. And I forgot to mention the last one is I always have to count the sides to see what shape this is. I think the last one is the long octagon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes. So the cookie I did the James Darrow in, it is our long octagon cookie, which is in our shop. Now, this is the hexagon, the long hexagon, and this is the medium size. I didn't want to do the large size for this macrame because I knew it was already going to be a lot of work, and I didn't want a huge cookie to have to fill. But it works out great for this because it's the exact, obviously I have it sideways to work, but it looks like a hanger, right? It gives you enough room to be able to do the hanger on the top, like the little string that you hang up on your wall, hanging to the wall, and then the wood, and then the hanging itself. It was the perfect kind of cookie cutter dimension size to be able to do this macrame. And then I did, obviously I did the little hanger part, and then I did the wood, which I just used brown icing, and I just layered several things of wood, brown icing to make it look like the wood hanger, which I have a macrame hanging right here. This is one I just got, and my husband and I just went to Mexico for our 10-year anniversary, and so that was my souvenir that I picked out from our resort. So, and I got black because I love black. obviously. I wear black all the time, but I love black. And so I got that one. So this one has a circle wood hanger, and then the black macrame is on there. Okay, back to our cookie though. So I did just a wood slat instead of a circle like that one. And I did where, as you can see, it has to, I don't know if you can see it really well, but the macrame has areas that it has to attach to the wood. So that's why I did the little strips across the wood to make it look like the yarn is being attached to that wood hanger. So it's a little detail, but I think it matters, and I think it makes a difference in the outcome of the cookie. Now, here's the hard part. You do string after string after string. So this is why you need really thick icing, is because you are going to be building this up as you go. Like, I didn't have drying time in between all of these cookies. I just all of these lines. I just worked and worked and worked on the same cookie until I got it to where I wanted it to be. So the first thing I did is I did one pass through where I got the lines close but not touching, and then I went through and now I'm just going through and building it up. So first time was just to kind of give me that one base layer, and then now I'm going to go through and build up in between every single one of those strings. So again, this is supposed to look like yarn, so it doesn't have to be straight down. If you look at my macrame here, I know it's probably out of focus, but if you look at my macrame here, the strings are kind of like all over the place. I mean, they mostly hang down, but they don't always hang down straight. So this part is perfectly fine if you don't have exactly straight lines. If your lines curve a little bit, if they move a little bit to the left or to the right, all of that is perfectly fine when you're doing a macrame design. You just want it to kind of hang down, and that building up of those layers is what is giving you that texture and that appearance of yarn. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's like I already said, this part hurts. It's thick icing, and you're constantly having to keep consistent pressure on your bag as you drag the line of icing down over and over and over again. And you can see there are times where I break the pressure a little bit, and I let go, and I don't keep that consistent pressure, and so my line of icing breaks, which is fine because you're doing so many layers at this point that it'll cover it up. So it's not a huge deal if your lines of icing aren't a complete line every single time. Just try to go back over it later and cover it up by doing a line of icing. Now that I have enough layers of string going down, I need to add an actual design to it to make it look like macrame. So I'm just freehanding this, but I decided to do some vertical crisscrossing. So I just started with some V's, and now I'm just layering them over and just crossing the lines back over each other so that I have kind of a little bit of a checkered look. Obviously, I can't knot my icing like the macrame is known for. It's known for with the designs, the yarn being knotted together, and that's how it's created its designs. So obviously I can't do that. So I'm going to do a back and forth motion on my icing to kind of mimic that kind of knotting of the yarn to make the designs. So at the bottom of where I have my crisscrossed checkered design, I am then going to do a little bit of a back and forth so it looks like a knot, and then I'm going to add some fringe underneath that just by doing some more lines directly under where I have it knotted. And again, with fringe, you're going to want to make sure that it's not perfectly straight because fringe goes everywhere. So at this point, I'm like purposely moving my icing and making the little fringed pieces go different directions just so that there's more of an authentic feel, and also so that it stands apart from the yarn behind it. Now that I've done the fringe on the bottom, it's time to add more to the crisscross elements at the top. So I'm going to do that back and forth motion just over and over again on the lines that I've already created to give that like knotted, wrapped experience that we have with macrame. And I feel like I'm really not knowledgeable on macrame, and so I obviously don't know all the terms on how people create and how they accomplish this look, but so ignore my ignorance here in my terminology as I'm trying to describe to you what I'm doing on my cookie. But I am doing a back and forth motion, and honestly sometimes it's like a loop. See, I am doing a loop, so it's not a straightforward back and forth. It's actually, if you watch my piping bag really closely, I'm actually doing swirls all the way down, so that it gives it a little bit more of that like wrapped effect, which I don't think that you're going to be able to see it. But this right here, it's all wrapped around the wood. So that's the effect that I'm trying to accomplish, is this like wrapped look. Y'all are probably gonna be like, I'm tired of seeing her macrame. It's just, I have one. So once you do all of the lines and you cover up all of your work, then you're done. Then you have your macrame hanger completed. And unfortunately, if you're like me, it was like, oh, I got one done. And then, oh, I still have a lot more to do. I can't remember how many I did in the set, but it was a lot. So they definitely hurt. I would probably say I did 6 or 7 of those maybe. It definitely hurt my hand, and I could probably tell you, but I would imagine that each one of those probably took about 8 minutes or so. Hang on, let me look. All right, I just went back and looked, and actually if you count the flooding time, like the outlining, the flooding, not the drying time, but just like the actual work time for this cookie, it was 12 minutes. 12 minutes per cookie. That's not great. Not great at all. So yeah, I mean, that one adds up. If you do more than just a few of them, you're talking about over an hour on one design. So thankfully we have other cookies in this set that were pretty easy to crank out. So just know, if you're doing a cookie that has that level of detail, that you're going to be spending quite a while on that cookie. But 12 minutes is a pretty big chunk of time per cookie. All right, the next one is, we're getting near the end of our designs, but the next one is a baby onesie. And I have had this cookie cutter for quite a while, and it's one of my favorites. I love doing the onesies for the boy sets and then the little jumpers for my little girl sets. I can't resist adding that, even though I know that now they have like footy cookie cutters, and oh my goodness, those are so cute. I don't have one of those, but if I did, I would probably add it to my sets. So like the little footy pajama cookies are super cute, and that would be a good addition to a baby shower set if you wanted to do that instead of this little onesie. But this one, I decided to do the dark navy, the dark blue, as my background. And then I'm going to do a wet on wet technique to kind of get design onto the fabric, because fabric is all one piece, right? You don't have, if you have stripes, your stripes aren't sitting on top of your fabric. It's a part of your fabric. So I wanted to make sure I did that technique as a wet on wet to stay authentic and true to the look of fabric and the look of a onesie. So I am going to do stripes because I think stripes are pretty cute for a boy. So I'm going to start with the lighter tan color that I just did the macrame in. I'm doing the thick icing to do this wet on wet technique. If you do a thin icing on a wet on wet technique, your icing will be a lot wider. Whereas if you do, your stripes will be wider because it's a looser icing, so it's going to spread more on top of your other already existing flood. Whereas if you do a thick icing and you're doing a wet on wet, you can get smaller stripes. You can get more detailed wet on wet designs, and those stripes stay in place, you know, whereas if you do too thin of an icing and you do that wet on wet, it kind of all blends together. And so you have less control of the end product, which is fine sometimes. That's sometimes what you want. You want that like spread out, like blending of all the colors together. Whereas here, I wanted those stripes to stay nice and crisp. And so you don't have color bleed and you don't have to worry about it spreading out too much. You want to use a thick icing for your stripes. Once that has dried, I wanted to make sure and have another place where my antlers were a part of the design. Again, this is the invitation, and this is definitely like part of the theme. And so I wanted to have antlers again in a different design. And so I put it on, I thought it would look cute on the onesie. So I'm going to do pretty much the same thing I did on the antler cookie itself. And I'm going to do just a really small antlers. I'm not going to actually build up the antlers here. I'm just going to do one little pass with my brown, and then I'm going to come back and mimic in a very small way. I'm going to mimic the same design on that round cookie. So I'm going to put some greenery at the bottom, and then I'm going to finish up the cookie with his initial in the middle as well, just as a nod to that very first design that we did. Now, when you're doing greenery and details in this small of a manner, this is why, again, you really need that thick icing. If you had too thin of icing right here, you would just get so frustrated because nothing would be holding its shape and you wouldn't get this specific definition in your design. So definitely make sure thick icing, and then with just, the tiniest bit of pressure on that icing bag is what you will use for your greenery and to use for this small area. You just barely squeeze to get out icing. Otherwise, if you squeeze too much, you're going to have way too much icing piping out of your bag, and you just can't achieve this level of small detail on your cookie. Now that I've added the blue, I am going to add a little bit more detail to the onesies. I'm going to put some buttons up top, and then I'm going to put some snap buttons at the very bottom of our little onesie to kind of add detail, not just in the design here, but also to the onesie itself. And the last thing is I'm going to add a J, and I'm not going to do my projector at all here. We can all pipe a letter, especially that letter that's that small. We don't have to have a projector to be able to pipe the letter. So I just hand piped, that's not right. I just by hand piped out his little initial letter, which is J for James. And that's it. Our onesie cookie is done. We're already over an hour in, so I'm happy to report that this is the very final design in our set. This is the baby Rattle cookie. Now, I wanted to add some wood elements. They told me they were decorating with woods, and so I wanted to add some wood elements to this cookie. I talked about the brown and the antlers, but one way I wanted to add wood in, I thought would be great for the rattle part, for the log to be the top part of the rattle. So, and I've done this with other baby sets. When I do a baby set, I always include a rattle. Like 9 times out of 10, I'm going to include a rattle. And the top part of the rattle, I'm going to make it whatever the theme is. So I have actually done a wood rattle before, so that wasn't a huge leap for me to include that here. If you can incorporate whatever the theme is onto your rattle, that's a really cute way to be able to keep something baby but also on theme. So here I did the outside of my wood log, which I just went back and forth with my brown icing. And then I made the bottom part of the rattle. I went ahead and did that brown as well. I did put a squiggly line of thick icing in the middle of that because I have found that for some reason that area of my rattles, they don't crater, but they do sink in a little bit. So it's not as clean of icing as like my other flooded areas. I tend to have thicker icing. I don't know how to say it. It's not flat icing. It's full. My icing tends to look full, but for some reason on my rattles, on that bottom portion, it tends to fall a little bit flatter than what I like. So I'm trying to prevent that by adding that squiggly line of icing underneath it before I flood it. And then I'm going to, after I flood that area, then I'll go back and I'll add that same icing, that same flood icing to our wood part. And again, you can tell once I've said over and over again, I have thick icing. So I am going to have to spread out this flood icing just a little bit with my scribe tool just to get it to smooth out, and then to go into all the little crevices that I had left open after I had gone through and done the outside of my wood log. I can feel my voice getting scratchy. This is a long tutorial in itself, but I also just I'm batch recording. So you'll see me in the same exact outfit for the unicorn cookie set that I put on YouTube at this point that you see this. It will have been a few weeks before. And so I'm batch recording. I'm doing it all at one time. And so I can definitely tell that my voice is getting a little bit scratchy. So I'm sorry about that. With this next part, after your wood has dried on the top of the rattle and of course the little circle at the bottom, you're going to want to add your bow. Now I'm going to layer this bow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to do the little dots down the middle to tie the rattle, the top part of the rattle and the bottom part of the rattle together. But then I'm going to do the bow section. And the first thing you're going to do in order to have a layered bow is that you are going to have to flood the entire bottom of the bow, which I know looks funny right now, but we will fix it in just a second. So let that part dry completely. And now we are going to build up the bow by adding a second layer of icing. And I do this on a lot of things, if you want your cookie to be layered and to have a part stand above another part, then you can layer it like this. And this is something I didn't really think about doing in my early stages of cookies. I would have just tried to have a bow separation by just doing a small part of the bow and then letting it dry, and then doing another part of the bow and letting it dry. Whereas if you do it this way, you have depth. That's the word I'm looking for. You have depth to your cookie if you layer it this way. Now, it's not always going to work, but I do it as often as I can when I think that when a cookie needs that depth. So like if you have a character cookie and they need like a whole lot of hair, or they need shoes on top of what they already have on, or, this is a way that you can flood the entire cookie and then come back and layer on top of where that extra flood is, just to give it that additional depth. I hope that makes sense. So here our bow, I wanted to kind of have it where it's wrapping around, and so it just putting that second layer on top will help you to achieve that. But you have to flood the whole area underneath first to be able to accomplish that look. Now that that has dried, we are going to come back and do his monogram. Now there is a website, and I am so sorry, I cannot think of what it is on the top of my head. It will be in the description box below, but it is a website that I go to every single time I need a monogram. It's free. You just enter in their initials, and then it gives you several different monogram options, like I want to say 8 or 9. They're all different types of styles. And for my rattles, I tend to do this a lot, and I'll get the one that fits in a circle. So this one looks the best in a circle, but they have all different kinds of monogram styles, and it's free. And basically I enter it into the field. I will have a whole separate video about this. I will have a video that comes out right after this, a few days after this, that explains how I do this, because the best way to show you is just to screen record myself doing it. So I will have a video that comes out that specifically shows you how I do monograms, because it's kind of hard to explain. But anyway, it is free, and I will show you what that is, and I will have the website linked below. I just did his monogram, which his initials are JDM. So of course, when you're doing a monogram in this style, the M is his last name, and so that's going to be your biggest letter, and then the first name and the middle name will go alongside of it. I outlined it, and then now I'm going back. I flooded it, and then now I'm going back and getting out those air bubbles and smoothing out that icing so that it's nice and beautiful and smooth in your end product. But I'm not going to stop there. I am going to add just a few more details to this rattle. The bottom looks pretty boring to me. I have a hard time leaving something empty, and sometimes that's a flaw, because sometimes I feel like sets could probably be just fine with some emptiness, with some simplicity, but I felt like the bottom was way too empty. So I'm going to add one more spot in the middle of my bow. I'm going to build that little bow up one last time by putting a dot in the middle of my bow, and then I'm going to add some greenery to the bottom of our rattle. It's not going to be much, it's just a little bit, but it's enough to break up the emptiness, and also it incorporates the greenery that I have added to a lot of the other designs in our set. So it's just tying it all together. It's tying in the rattle to all the other designs, just back and forth on your greenery with your leaves. So as with all the other designs, I went ahead and made my stems. I'm going back with the dark green, and then I'll do the light green, and then I'll add just a little bit of blue to the design. And really that's going to be it for our set. I'm going to let y'all keep watching as I finish up talking about this design or this set. But if you have any questions at all, please let me know. I will have the graphic up for this soon. If not, when this is posted, it will come out soon. I will also remind you that if you need me to change anything, feel free. I will have a monogram step-by-step tutorial on here on a membership exclusive that shows you how I do the website I go to and how I do the monograms. I'll do that in the next few days. And then I feel like there was something else Don't forget, every link you need is in the description box below. And really and truly, you can modify this set easily by just switching up the colors. So if you have a boho theme for a little girl, the blues and even the browns, that could easily be swapped out for some pink neutrals, some blush, champagne type colors. Easily it can be swapped out for a girl theme. So I hope that whenever you see these tutorials, you don't feel like you have to do them exactly how I did them. You're more than welcome to switch things up to fit a different gender, to fit a different theme. I always hope that the lessons that you learn in these cookies, that you're able to take them and use them in all of your other sets, so that you're not just boxed in to only using the skill set for these cookies alone, that you're able to use what you've learned here in all sorts of ways with your other cookies. But this is it. This is the full set. I really am proud of it. I think it turned out great, and honest to goodness, my sweet little nephew James is the most precious baby, and I am so glad that he's a part of our lives, and it was a true honor making him these cookies. All right, friends, I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much. You really are my very favorite people. Bye-bye.